I really thought this was going to be a very easy fan edit, and then it turns out I spent weeks messing around with this movie.
Some people, you squeeze them, they focus. Others fold.
It's kind of peak 90s Al Pacino just chewing scenery.
Whoa, there's Pam.
You've got Keanu Reeves doing a southern accent. He probably shouldn't be doing accent work.
What are you gonna do? Sue me?
But it's better than Dracula.
I have offended you with my ignorance, Count.
So what is the deal with this whole uncensored edit? Because the movie's got full frontal nudity and violence and swearing and all kinds of other stuff. What possibly did they censor? And the answer is a statue. They censored a statue. And it wasn't even necessarily because the statue was offensive. I mean, it is kind of a nude statue thing. Nope, it's because of a lawsuit. So there's a statue that looks kind of like the statue in the movie, but not exactly. And it's owned by a church, and the church convinced the guy who made the statue to join a lawsuit with them and sue. The movie studio was really worried about delaying the release of the movie, so they just settled. I'm not a lawyer. I feel like they probably could have won. And unfortunately, what this means is every release of this movie past what you saw in theaters and a very select number of DVDs that were created kind of before the lawsuit went into effect have been edited to remove this statue. And I will say, I got the Blu-ray to do this fan edit. What they did was actually kind of impressive. The digital work that they did to remove the statue and replace it with a very generic, forgettable statue. The statue ends up kind of playing a role, especially in the climax of the movie, and it's supposed to kind of create this vibe for every time you're in this room, and this generic statue just isn't doing it. So the change definitely hurt the movie for the worse. Even though the statue's really only there for maybe like 5 minutes, so maybe 20 minutes of scenes, but actually 5 minutes of footage time. So it's not a ton. And that's why I kind of thought like, oh, I'll just go in there and put the statue back in. There was another Redditor who I'll call out, when I post this, has access to the DVD, this very rare DVD that I think goes for like over $100, if you can find it on eBay. And it's got all the statue footage. Now, unfortunately, mid to late 90s DVDs were not always great. So there's some motion artifacting. Obviously, the quality is sort of widescreen DVD. You have like 300 some pixels of vertical resolution. So what ended up taking all my time was a combination of doing the upscaling processes, which I have always used DaVinci Resolve for my upscaling projects, which when you have high quality footage is fine. It can take it up, 1080p to 4K, really no problem, and it looks good. But I found it does not do well with low quality footage. And when I say low quality, I mean this sort of widescreen DVD footage, because the widescreen DVDs were really formatted for a 4:3 screen, basically a square TV. And so you really don't have a lot of resolution to work with. So I end up getting a 1-month subscription to Topaz, which is kind of the industry standard for upscaling, particularly for low quality footage. I was really impressed. And actually, the timing couldn't have been better. They just released basically a model. They call them sort of models, but it's basically different methods of doing the upscaling. So they prioritize different things. And some footage will look better under one model and worse under another. But they released a model that basically used to be only cloud access, or you'd have to pay for like a yearly subscription to have access to it on your computer. Well, during my subscription time, they actually released a local model that I could run on my GPU that really did some amazing stuff. They call it Starlight, and it kind of saved this edit. I would have released it either way, and I think it would have looked okay. But in my initial runs at this, I was set to just release it, Blu-ray quality, 1080p. I just didn't think I could push it further. But with this Starlight model, it was really cool, some of the results. Now, when you had situations where a character was in a wide shot, they just made a guess of who's there in the background. There's not enough detail. And I do think as time goes on, some of these upscaling algorithms, I hope will take into account if you feed it a whole scene or, a much larger piece of a project for this upscaling, maybe for this kind of preservation project or anything else really, that it could take into account. Like, this person in this wide shot is probably based on context and costume and other things. Probably this person that's in this close up, and it could actually put in the detail of that person's face in that wide shot as well. It didn't really do that very well in this point, but any of these close up shots absolutely look incredible. And in fact, some of the shots ended up looking maybe even better than the Blu-ray. Also, while we're talking about it, there was some framing that was different between the DVD and the Blu-ray. The Blu-ray seemed to punch in a little bit more, not huge, but a few percent difference, which really made it difficult for me to match up the footage sometimes, because there were shots where I layered and composited things. Obviously, my preference was to just get the statue into all of these shots, this 5 minutes or so. But sometimes, the Blu-ray, especially when we're in a wide or a medium shot, the Blu-ray just looked better for any person that was in that shot. As we go into this video, I'll actually show a little bit of the work that I did. I can show a little bit of how I composited things together for anyone interested. But just to say that slight difference in framing and unfortunately some of these motion artifacts, because DVDs were really, they're typically done at 30 frames a second effectively. It's 24 frames a second is how they shot on film, but the DVDs are assuming that you're going to play it on a TV screen that's made for 60 hertz. And so they're basically doing what's called a 3:2 pull down, which is just fancy math to make 24 frames work within a 30 frame wrapper. So I did my best. When I pulled the DVD footage, I sort of decompressed it, so to speak, to ProRes and let it play out at 24 frames a second. But inevitably, there's some judder, which is just sort of motion artifacting. And so I've removed as much as I could, but there's some moments where you might still notice that. End of the day, I'm really happy with how it turned out. I've actually got an upscaled 4K version. There's a 1080p version. And then I also did an alternate version. So there's basically two completely different versions of Devil's Advocate that you can watch if interested. The other one I'm just calling a work print cut. There is about 15 to 20 minutes of deleted scenes. And some of them are just extended scenes. Some of them are completely cut from the movie. And it really does. Some of them are completely unnecessary and should very well be on the cutting room floor. But some of them do really add a little bit to the plot. It's very 90s. It's courtroom drama, psychosexual thriller. It's a whole lot of things. And it's the courtroom stuff that ends up getting extended quite a bit because that clearly was not really the priority of the movie. A lot of priority of the movie is letting Al Pacino chew scenery. So I think it's worth a watch if you're a Devil's Advocate. I don't know. You're a big, stan of the Devil's Advocate. I think it's an interesting way to experience the movie that adds whatever it ended up being, over 15 minutes of extra footage. And all I did in this, the reason I'm calling it a work print cut, the deleted scenes were not particularly well curated. They clearly did not finish color timing on them or, really much else. The sound is basically just from on set, from what I can tell. There's no real sound design that went into them. So what I ended up doing is just sort of cutting them in where they belonged in the movie And then I just, kind of let them run. I didn't try to, if there was better Blu-ray footage during portions of it, cut that in. I just kind of let them play. And there was definitely some editing differences. So I think that'll be something people can appreciate. You can see a different version of how some of these scenes might have played out. You'll be able to tell which scenes and shots are from the deleted scenes. They're quite degraded versus the Blu-ray footage. For anybody who's into that, you can enjoy that. All of the shots of the sculpture are also in that. However, not the upscaled versions. I use straight DVD footage. Again, you can kind of see how lo-fi, I guess we might describe it, the footage was originally in the DVD. So even as that sort of alternative experience, you also get to see when compared to what I'm calling the resculpted Devil's Advocate, you can really see, the quality that I was trying to work with. And I'm going to just show a little bit of some of the work that I did just so people can see, how I was able to combine the footage and sort of get the best possible output that I could. Okay, we're here in DaVinci Resolve, and I don't typically do a screen share thing, but so this will be interesting. First thing I'm going to point out is the opening shot for introducing the sculpture is kind of brutal because it actually is this moving elevator sequence. And so comping that all together was just super annoying. So luckily what I found is the preceding scene actually came out really well in the Topaz upscale. So I actually just held on to that for the entire time. You can kind of see that play out. Also, interesting fun fact, Charlize Theron there on the left, it's actually her first ever American feature film. So that's kind of a fun little thing you can look out for when watching this. But you can see here, I basically end up framing. So the Topaz footage starts to disappear, and then you end up with what I just sort of labeled as like this GPU upscale version of the Topaz. So for the wide shots, unfortunately, I did not always use the sort of higher quality Topaz output because specifically in this shot, Al Pacino looked like, I don't know, young Antonio Banderas or something. It was just something not Al Pacino. And you can even see a little bit of the motion artifacting from the DVD that it's just, again, it's weird compression things from the late 90s. So is what it is. That's maybe one of the worst shots, to be honest. There's so many other shots that really work so much better. So yeah, that's that piece, but I'll jump forward and you can see in this shot, it's actually like a 50-50. It's actually the right side is the Blu-ray and the left side is the DVD. And so luckily, because you're sort of concentrating, the focus is on right side of the screen is more in focus, so to speak. I think it kind of works all right. Again, you can see that I'm using the GPU accelerated Topaz upscale versus that sort of Starlight newer model. Again, because Al Pacino looked kind of weird. But I will show you. So again, this is kind of part of the reason that you need this version of the movie. They do this lingering shot. Keanu looks at the sculpture and you just get this lingering shot of, these bodies. And in the sort of censored version, he's just looking at this random statue. It just is sort of nonsensical. Later in the movie, I won't spoil anything, but the things start happening involving this statue, and it just makes no sense because Keanu's making no reaction to it. Anyway, for those who have seen it, you might know what I'm talking about. So, again, this is just one more GPU accelerated before I move to the Topaz model. Again, it's because Pacino just didn't quite look great in this sort of wide shot. But here you can see, much better quality. It's just, really approaching that Blu-ray quality. I did my best to sort of color correct to match them. Like I said, there were some differences. Green was pushing a little hard in the DVD footage and other things. And there was also some exposure differences, but I think I got it really pretty close. Um, I'll move forward a little bit and can show you this is another 50-50 split. And I don't actually even remember where I split the footage. I think maybe in the middle of the table or something. And I think really sells pretty well. I had to do a little stabilization on the footage just to make sure, and then some adjustments of, sort of crop in ever so slightly and skewed the footage, I don't remember vertically or horizontally to get it to sort of match reasonably. But I think it works. Um, so that's kind of this first section of the movie, and you can see this is that Starlight model, and it really looks pretty good. Um, but one last piece, I think what I did here was actually instead of doing a 50-50 kind of thing because the statue was just basically over in one side, I think I actually cropped maybe even up slightly and just on the edge here just to fill the statue in. You can sort of see, it's mostly a static shot, so it worked out pretty well. I'll go to the next section and just show a couple things real quick. This one was kind of easy, really, because it's basically just a static wide shot. And all I did was, again, sort of cropped up, cropped over, and just kind of layered the statue over and did a little, what I'll call feathering, but I think in DaVinci Resolve, they just called softening, but sort of it created a little bit of transition between the two pieces of footage, but I think it works pretty well. There's a little bit of, the DVD footage clearly has some extra noise. Although with some of the upscale footage specifically, I think I might have added it to all of it, but some of the upscale footage ends up having sort of a noise reduction automatically happen to it. And so I did add some just 35 millimeter grain to it. Again, it's digital, but I do think DaVinci Resolve does a really good job. It's not actually an overlay. It is actually affecting the light of the shot in a certain way. So I think it sells reasonably well. And then finally, this one was another 50-50 where, Pacino's luckily on one side and doesn't cross over. The problems with shots where either there's movement with the camera or a character crosses in front of the statue and there's not much I could do there. The footage just did have problems of doing a perfect match for movement, or there was weird, ghosting artifacts and things that just clearly betrayed that this was not the exact same shot getting clumped together. So that's that sort of second segment. And then I'm not going to play too far into this to avoid spoilers just in case. But Keanu comes in and you can see. So this one, I think, again, I don't exactly even remember how I comped this in, but I think it's just mostly the statue. And I picked a point on the table, the bottom of the table, and then sort of the sides where it goes dark. And I think it really kind of sells reasonably well. And then the toughest part, I think, was this last sequence. I'm going to sort of not show too much more just for spoilers, but this is where eventually the shots do go back to the Blu-ray having the sculpture. I don't know how legally that worked, but it really does play into the end of the movie. So I think they maybe told them we'll remove it for the majority of the movie, and then at the end when there's the climax, we just have to have it in there. And it becomes sort of nonsensical in the actual Blu-ray and widely released version of the movie. But one of the problems was that they actually edited the widely released version quite differently. The sound, the length of the movie, the sound, everything in those realms stays the same, but they pick some alternate shots. There's some shots they held on longer. So there's really a whole different version. And so I ended up having to hold some of the upscaled footage for longer than I might have. I actually did do a version where I just kind of preferred cutting to the Blu-ray quicker And the Reddit user who provided the DVD footage pointed out like, hey, wait, this isn't quite the theatrical. It's actually they hold on this shot in the the theatrical version or the DVD. Totally right. So I went back in and recreated the way it was intended. Because if you're watching this version, you might as well see the way as close as possible to what was in the theaters almost 30 years ago. So that is, what was done, the magic that I was able to pull. Um, it's it ended up being quite a bit of work. Like I said, partially because I did the initial work fighting against the available footage, so to speak, um, and sort of limitations of the motion, sort of the recomposition they did with some of the shots, but then also finding like, wait, there's this new version of the Topaz upscaling that really opened up some possibilities. So that was exciting. And I was very willing to jump back in and almost do the edit a second time and sort of do all that color correction again and everything, just because I think it really paid off. I don't want to say this is the definitive version of the movie, but if you want to see the movie the way it's meant to be, kind of might be. Maybe someday somebody can do something else with this, when technology gets even better. In fact, I'm sharing the DVD and ISO file of the DVD. So if somebody wants to take a crack at this, you can feel free to download, and maybe years down the line, amazing things will be even better for this upscaling technology. But for now, hope people enjoy this version of the movie, and would love to hear what people have to think. The timing of this was really interesting to do a month of Topaz, because I'll have another project coming out hopefully later this year that is use the same upscaling to get some footage that otherwise may not have been very usable. So always appreciate people watching. Hit me up in the comments if you have any questions or comments or encouragement, and we'll see you on the next video.